Hello and welcome back to the Ascent cycling podcast for yet another team preview ahead of the 2021 season of cycling. And in this one, we will be taking a detailed look at Trek-Segafredo, who have an interesting team for me. Maybe not so much for Guillaume, but we'll get into that as the podcast goes on. They didn't rack up as many victories as they would have hoped for in 2020, picking up 9 wins in total. Guillaume, what did you make of their 2020 season?
Well, I mean, first of all, I like being thrown under the bus after like genuinely 20 seconds. But yeah, it is indeed not a team I'm a massive fan of when sick at the lineup. However, they entered 2020 with the current world champion in Pedersen, current at the time, and he probably didn't have the season he would have wanted to have as a world champion. He probably would want to perform a lot on the Cobble Classics, which he did later on in the season when he had lost the Rainbow. But I mean, that season started as usual by winning the Down Under with Richie Porte. I mean, it was an interesting year for them. I think they had a few good results here and there. Grand Tour wise, they surprised all of us, in my opinion, by getting a podium with Richie Porte, who would then go and leave the team. But it was, Grand Tour wise, it was a decent year for them, especially on the Tour de France. But there really wasn't that main result that shocked me, or that made me think that Trek was a big team. Gonvelgem won by Pedersen. But apart from that, I'd say it's an average season for Trek-Segafredo.
It's an average year, but I think we really did see the development of Mads Pedersen in 2020, really after claiming the Rainbow Bands in 2019. We saw him develop into a bona fide mass sprinter, really. He won a stage at the Big Bang Tour, and let's not forget, he came close to winning a stage at the Tour de France in mass sprints. I think he was second on Champs-Élysées, just behind Sam Bennett. So Mads Pedersen really did develop into a world champion, I think, in 2020, showing that he is a super talented rider. Looking at him, he is 25 now, so really kind of coming into his prime years, and that win at Gent-Wevelgem really was a big one as well. I think probably the second biggest race he's won in his career. So Mads Pedersen is a rider for me definitely to keep an eye on this year. He's really developed. But also, let's not forget, Jastper Stuyven did win Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. A great win for him, for sure, outsprinting Yves Lampaert of De Koning Quickstep there. And for me, Trek-Segafredo have been a team to constantly disappoint in the classics in recent years, but they did take a step forward for me in 2020.
I mean, it's fair enough. I think we'll see if Jastper can go for the back-to-back on the Omloop this year. And you've mentioned them taking a step forward in the monuments, in the classics element. However, I think they might have taken a huge leap backwards when it came to Il-Lombardia, finishing, I think, 4th, 5th, and 6th, with respectively Nibali, Mollema, and Ciccone. I think with the start list this year being somewhat weak, I think they probably could have expected much better results than being 4th, 5th, and 6th. At least one rider on the podium. And it might have been the start of a disappointing season for a certain Italian rider that we might talk about later on. But we'll see, first of all, if they strengthened themselves coming in 2021. They lost 4 riders, signed 4th once again. The balance is what is there. However, they did lose a big name in Richie Porte, who is going back to Ineos as I said, a teammate. Coming out of his podium position on the Tour de France, his first ever Grand Tour podium. Just an amazing performance from Richie Porte. Another Australian has left the team in Will Clark. I think Peter Venning is retiring, and Alessandro Fanseu going to Eolo Cometa. I think he's going to get like 1 or 2 more years of experience, and then he will come back to Trek-Segafredo. And to replace those 4 riders, well, Joe, let's introduce their 4 signings.
So they signed Antonio Taberri from Team Kolpak, who is a rider really known for his win in the junior time trial in 2019 at the World Championships after, I think, going the wrong way or coming off his bike in the opening seconds. They also signed Jakob Ekholm and Matthias Skalmos Jensen, 2 Danes who, to be honest, I don't know a great deal about. They're 2 younger riders. And then you've really thrown me back under the bus right now because they have also signed the Eritrean from NTT, Emmanuel Gebregazabieh.
Now, we've briefly mentioned, obviously, Pedersen in the early part of the podcast, but he really came into form in 2020, coming off an unexpected, obviously, win on the World Championships ahead of Matteo Trentin. And I think he responded to a lot of the doubts that were around him. I think there were a lot of question marks around Mats Pedersen, whether he could be a worthy world champion. And I think he started off the Tour de France quite well with a second place in Nice in very treacherous conditions, which is something he seems to enjoy. I mean, that's how he won the World Championship in these conditions. I think before that, he was somewhat disappointing. I'm going to be really honest. But he was most likely aiming for the Classics that got cancelled in April due to the pandemic. I think he got a stage in Pologne as his sole result, sole win, as a world champion. But then his second part of the season really did well. 2 podiums, 2 second places on the Tour de France, a stage win on the Bing Bong Tour, I think, and the top 5 in the GC, and a huge win on the on Game ahead of Sénéchal and Matteo Trentin. Once again, Trentin losing to Mats Pedersen. And I think he's now settled as either the main leader or one of the best co-leaders you can have in a classic team, alongside Jastper Stuyven, the 28-year-old. You've said he's won the Omloop Niet Nieuwsblad. He's also, I think, won a Kuurne-Bruxelles-Kuurne early on in his career. Once again, probably not the best of year for him, despite that win on the Omloop, because the Cobble Classic in October weren't exactly good for Jastper. I think he got like 25th on the Ronde or something along those lines. He DNF'd on the World Champs, but 2020 was a special year, and I know for a fact that he will come back into 2021 with better intentions.
For sure he will, and they are a partnership who've come out, I think, fighting talk early this year, saying that they're really 2 riders who they think should be reckoned with among the cobbled favourites. And to be fair, I don't disagree, because they're both very quick in a sprint, particularly Mads Pedersen, but they both can sprint very well. So if they can just get to the end of these races in the front, Trek-Segafredo have a great chance, and that proved to be the case at Ghent-Wevelgem last year. You said Mads Pedersen did claim the win there. He was helped out. I think that was the race that Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel just stared at each other rather than looking at the actual race and let everyone else in the group go ahead. And then they sprinted for 8th and 9th or something like that. But yeah, Mads Pedersen, of course, did claim that race anyhow. And I can see them getting a big result this year in the Cobble Classics, whether that's Omloop Het Nieuwsblad or a race later on, such as even Paris-Roubaix. Don't count these guys out at Paris-Roubaix. I really think they could pose some kind of threat. And like I said, if they can get to the end with another rider, they stand a great chance.
I agree. I might not back them for a big win on something like Paris-Roubaix, because it's, after all, a very tough race. But I do have my eye on Mats Pedersen winning something like the E3 Classic or E3 Rolbeck. Or E3 Bing. I forgot the new name of the race, because I think it's changed again this year. But yeah, and with the help of someone like Eduard Teuns as well in the lineup, Tom Schoens, who also can do somewhat well when the road becomes a bit more cobbly, if that's a word. Then yeah, it's definitely a team to watch out for now on one-day classics, which is something they didn't really do over the past couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Ed Teuns is a rider I'm glad you mentioned, because he's probably not a leader compared to the other 2 in the Cobble Classics, but he's a great domestique for sure. And also another point on those 3 riders, they all went to the Tour de France last season. They kind of took it in turns to sprint for victory and kind of lead each other out. But I think this season they've come out and said they're going to focus on Mads Pedersen, who does seem to be the quickest of the 3 right now. So, another rider who has been at Trek for a very long time now, since I think 2015, is Bauke Mollema. The GOAT Bauke Mollema, of course, is his nickname. One of my favourite riders for sure. I'm a big Bauke Mollema fan, and I was delighted to see him take Il Lombardia, the first monument of his career, back in 2019. Looking at his 2020 season, he was going fairly well at the Tour de France, but he did crash. It was the same incident that saw Romain Bardet crash, and he later exited the race. I think it was stage 13. I think it was a broken collarbone, putting Bauke Mollema out for this season. And yeah, kind of ruined his season, to be fair. He didn't look too bad in the build-up races, but really that crash at the Tour paid his chances, and it meant he had a disappointing season. This year, he's planning to do the Giro and Tour de France double, like a certain Vincenzo Nibali, who we'll come on to very shortly. I think he'll do the Ardennes Classics as well, as a mixture of build-up races. So Bauke Mollema is a rider who I think he looked strong at the Tour de France. I believe it was 2017 or 2016, where Froome, of course, iconically ran up the mountain after crashing, I think, with Richie Porte as well. But yeah, Bauke Mollema looked great at that Tour de France, and he's always a rider goes into a Grand Tour as a dark horse, because everyone seems to count him out, and he is a strong rider who always seems to have had something go wrong, whether it's him cracking or a crash or a puncture at a wrong moment. It seems Bauke Mollema, for me, has been fairly unlucky in the GC at Grand Tours in his career, and looking at it, he did actually claim a podium back in 2011 at the Vuelta in the GC, which I completely forgot about. But at the Giro or the Tour de France, can he claim a podium? It would be a stretch, but I'm interested to see if he can try and challenge for a top 5 and maybe even a podium. Who knows?
You've mentioned him being a GOAT. I might not go that far, but he is a very good rider. He's a rider I actually like a lot. I've followed him ever since like the Rabobank years, because it was one of my favorite teams to make career modes with on PCM. And I think his lack of main results on the GC, usually due to bad luck or crashes, it is a bit of it kind of reminds me actually of Richie Porte, who always shown promises when there was a through race, but always would have something going against him. But with what happened with Richie in 2020, I wouldn't count Bauke Mollema out for something along those lines, although I might struggle to put Bauke at the same level of a Richie Porte. But I think you might agree with me here. We've done quite a lot of previews this year. I've never seen a rider having this many races already in his calendar before like the main Grand Tours. He's set to ride the Tour of the Alps, which is in like 2 days, races in Ardèche, then Italy, then Spain, then the Ardennes, then Giro, then Tour. His planning is already packed, and I think he knows what he wants. However, I wouldn't necessarily understand why he's going for Giro and the Tour de France. The Giro has probably one of the biggest start lists we've seen in the recent years, and I don't think he goes there as the main leader, because I'm pretty sure Vincenzo is already going here. Sorry. The same applies for the Tour de France. So they'll both be there as co-leaders. I'm not sure it's the wisest of decisions, especially knowing that these riders are now quite experienced and they're not exactly in their 20s. So yeah, it's somewhat odd. But I mean, he was able at one point in his career to be one of the best, if not the best climber. You've mentioned the stage where Chris Froome was running. He was indeed the best out of the favorite groups this stage. I'm not counting him out for a good performance. Whether he's going to win a GC, I don't think so. But I would be extremely thrilled to see Bauke Mollema on a podium of a Grand Tour for the first time since 2011, I think.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to see him on a Grand Tour? I think so many people would love that. And yeah, you say he's going to the Giro and the Tour. Vincenzo Nibali's doing the same for Trek-Segafredo. The thing is, they have limited options in the Grand Tours after Richie Porte's departure, and I guess they'll have one of them leading in each of those races. maybe they go in as co-leaders, I'm not sure. But perhaps one of them drop away, acting as a domestique, perhaps going for stage wins as well. And then they switch roles for the other. I guess that's how they're going to play it. We've spoken about having co-leaders before on the podcast, how we don't necessarily believe it's the best tactic. It's probably best to go in with a clear leader to a Grand Tour. But yeah, he's won Il Lombardia, he's won a Monument, he's won a stage of the Tour de France. He's had a podium at the Vuelta. I think he can do that one more time in his career. Whether it's this year, I mean, he's 34 years old now. So it's getting to the point where it could be too late in a few years' time for him to genuinely be a podium contender at a Grand Tour. But the Ardennes Classics as well. He's a good puncher, Bauke Mollema. And La Flèche, Liège even, don't count him out.
I would genuinely love to see Bauke Mollema win a big thing this year. Like, it would be just so nice to watch because he deserves it a lot. Like, I don't know, I really like Bauke Mollema. You've said he's the GOAT, but I mean, he's a really likable rider. And I think he might be too young though for Trek-Segafredo to try and win something. He could probably wait 2-3 years. Like Richie Porte, like maybe Alberto Contador, Heimar Zubeldia, Chris Horner. I mean, if you want to wait for Chris Horner, wait another decade. But give him time. Bauke Mollema is nearing his prime. Now, moving on to a rider maybe a bit more in his prime, a bit nearing his peak. Lo Squalo, Vincenzo Nibali. God, this team is so old. Vincenzo Nibali, 36-year-old, winner of all 3 Grand Tours, Vuelta in 2010, Tour de France in 2014, Giro in 2016, and I believe there's one before 2013 off the top of my head, but I could be wrong. 3-time Monument winner with Sanremo, with Lombardia. He's won a lot of things, and he came into 2020, with a decent role in the team. He was leading the team in Paris-Nice. He did somewhat well. I think he got a top 5. And then he went to the Giro. I mean, he did other things in the meantime. Lombardia, where he finished 6th. I do believe he should have been higher in that race if Trek had been better. A couple of top 10s on some one-day races in Italy. But the main result that really disappointed me for Vincenzo was his Giro. Now, I know it's not the Vincenzo Nibali that we've seen a decade ago, because he's not that young anymore. But he finished 8 minutes behind Tao Geoghegan Hart. And, I mean, I expected Vincenzo to do so well that year. I don't know, I always have a lot of hopes regarding Lo Squalo. And he just really disappointed me on the Giro. I think he got a top 10 on the stage of the Stelvio, but that was not the Squalo we know and love. And I'm really questioning whether this is probably like it could be his final year, in my opinion, because I don't think he even enjoys his current form. So I think this year is a make it or break it.
That's a big shout. I mean, I completely agree with you. His Giro was disappointing. There's no doubt about that. And it seems when watching the race, everyone was saying, oh, he's waiting for the final week. Wait for the final week and Nibali will be there. And obviously it didn't happen in the end. He never looked like winning the race at all. Never looked like being on the podium, really. But there has been a lot of shouts saying Vincenzo is done. I'm not sure just yet. I'm waiting, because he wasn't terrible throughout the early parts of last season. And I mean, he got a top 15 at the World Championships on parcours that don't necessarily suit him massively. He was second. He almost won the Giro just in 2019. I know we're talking 2 years ago now. But I believe Vincenzo still has more in the legs than some people believe. I think he could just surprise some people at the Giro or even the Tour de France this season.
I mean, I would love to see it. I'd love to see it, but is he finished? I wouldn't say so. I don't think you can really classify a rider like Nibali to be finished. But I think he might have lost some of his glory. And 2021 will be a big year for him. We said there'll be him and Mollema on both the Giro and the Tour de France. Yeah, I don't want to see Vincenzo Nibali ending his career, or potentially ending his career, without a bang. So I want him to win a big stage on either of the two Grand Tours.
Do you think he can do it? Do you think, end of the year, is Vincenzo Nibali going to have stood on the final GC podium at Grand Tour?
Realistically, I'm going to say no. My heart wants to say yes.
I'm having visions, and I can see it. I think he's going to do it. I really do. I think this may be... I've had some bold claims throughout these previews, and I think I've topped myself here by saying this because so many people cannot see it happening. But I think Nibali, I think he can do it. I think he can stand on the podium of the Tour de France this season.
That is one hell of a claim. So, I mean, I'm going to guess your podium is therefore like Roglic, Pogacar, Nibali, not in that order.
Oh, he's third. He's third behind those two.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the Ineos team. I'm forgetting a lot of teams here. But maybe I'm talking from far too much from my heart here. But El Squalo, I believe he can get another podium at Grand Tour. But let's be real. Does he want another podium? Does he care about a podium? This is a man who's won every Grand Tour. He's won the Giro, Tour, Vuelta. Would he rather go for stages at this point? Perhaps. I'm not sure. Because that's the thing. He has won literally everything he could want to. He's won every Grand Tour. His 2 home monuments he has won as well. He has accomplished so much in his career. He's won 6 stages at the Tour, 7 at the Giro. What is there left for him to do?
I mean, it's interesting you've mentioned that. I don't think today he really cares about getting third, like Richie Porte could have last year. I think he's most likely going to try and go for big wins that won't necessarily give him any GC gain, but purely to say that, yeah, I've won that stage. And I'm looking at the Tour de France parcours. The one stage that I think a lot of riders will have their eye on is going to be the stage between Sorgues and Malocène, because you climb the Ventoux twice, and trust me, for having done it, it's tough. It's really tough, and it ends up with like a 22-kilometer descent from the summit of the Ventoux to Malocène. It's a very, very technical descent as well, which is exactly what Vincenzo loves. So I might not go for a very bold claim such as Vincenzo Nibali finishes third of the Tour de France, but I will say that Vincenzo wins in Malocène on stage 11 of the Tour de France.
It's a great shout. I mean, looking at his Tour de France results, he's won on some famous climbs before. Val Thorens, of course, a few years ago. The Hautacam, La Planche de Belfi, he's won on. But I think Ventoux would be one to add to his collector's book. So we've spoken about Mollema, Nibali, 2 older riders. Trek have gained the reputation a little bit of becoming a bit of a retirement home for some of the talented riders of earlier years. But one talented rider they have, now 26 years old, is Giulio Ciccone, who had a down year last year for sure. He suffered quite a lot. He contracted the coronavirus at bad moments, essentially, and he didn't really accomplish a great deal. He's a rider who's won 2 stages at the Giro before. He's also worn the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, which he did in 2019 as well. And we've had the Tour de la Provence at the time of recording this, and Giulio Ciccone looks back. I mean, we saw him in the breakaway on stage 1 with Alaphilippe and Gianni Moscon, the 70-kilometer breakaway, and an ambitious effort. And I saw Ciccone said after the stage that why did he go in the break on a flatter stage that doesn't particularly suit him? He said he wanted to show that he is back and prove to himself more than anything that he's going to put the 2020 bad year behind him, and really show that he is back. And he did that again on stage 2, where he almost beat Ballerini in the uphill drag to the line, just finishing second place on the stage. And then stage 6, very impressive on Ventoux as well, finishing in the top 10 on Mont Ventoux to Chalet Reynard. So I'm expecting a big year from Ciccone, perhaps the best of his career so far.
I would tend to agree. You've mentioned Trek being a bit of a retirement home. I think it's still a premium retirement home because Kubeka exists. And yeah, very interesting Tour de la Provence. I think he's right in saying that going in a breakaway on a stage that really doesn't suit him was a very good way to prove to the others, but also to prove to himself that 2020 was behind him. I think he's done quite well on the on Chalet Renard, working with Bauke Mollema. So I don't really know exactly if there was a clear hierarchy between the two of them, but they finished in the same time. And I'm quite curious to see how he's gonna do. He will be, I'm guessing, leading La Vuelta for Trek-Segafredo. He's announced on La Vuelta, and with Nibali and Mollema not doing it, I don't see anyone else realistically in the Trek lineup that could aim for a leadership position. He will be on the Giro, so Trek is going for a huge team on the Giro. We'll see how he performs in the upcoming days on the Tour des Alpes. There'll be a decent start list, a parcours that suits riders like Gio Ciccone. But from what we've seen on the Tour de la Provence, knowing that his contract comes the end of the season, I think that Gio Ciccone is back. Just give him the contract, give him what he wants. Giulio is back.
He definitely is. You mentioned La Vuelta. Can he lead the GC? I'm still very skeptical because 40 kilometers of individual time trialing in that race, Ciccone is going to lose a lot of time for sure. So he may go stage hunting there instead. We'll see. But for sure, I can see him winning KOM jerseys, stages at Grand Tours, and maybe even competing at some other races as well. Looking at his schedule, he's riding the likes of Tirreno, Volta Ciclista Catalunya. Definitely, he could be in the mix there.
I think it's. I'm having a vision as well as you are, but I'm getting a vision that the three main climbers of Trek this year won't necessarily go for GCs and will go for a lot of stage hunting. If they realize quickly that they can't fight for the GC. So I've said Vincenzo will win in Malocène. Do not count Ciccone out of the running for the win in a lone breakaway on the Lagos de Covadonga on the Vuelta.
Oh, there we go. And of course, Trek-Segafredo were one of the few World Tour teams not to win a Grand Tour stage in 2020. So perhaps that is their big goal coming into this season.
Finally, another rider we have to mention, as he's one of the only riders able to go quick for Trek-Segafredo. Matteo Moschetti, the 24-year-old former rider from Polartec Cometa, who I believe has already performed somewhat well this year. Already 2 top 10s, including a top 5 on the Tour de la Provence. He is the main sprinter of Trek-Segafredo. He will participate in the UAE Tour in a couple of days, and I think it's a good way for him to try and compete with some decent sprinters. You'll have the likes of Gaviria fighting for UAE. We'll do a preview of the UAE Tour later on this week. But he's had a tough 2020, to say the least. He got a top 10, I think, on La Vuelta, and then he finished out of the delays. He DNF'd quite a couple of times. He DNF'd on Burgos, Bessèges, Bretagne Classic, National Championship of Italy, Grand Piemonte, Tour of Hungary, in Bing Bong Tour. He hasn't finished a single stage race last year. So he will look to put 2020 well and truly behind him, and aim for 2021 with better hopes. Why not getting a couple of stages on his own Grand Tour? You've said Trek didn't win a stage on either of the 2 Grand Tours last year. Matteo Moschetti could well and truly be the key to resolve that problem.
For sure. And Moschetti, now 24 years old, he's had a difficult career in general, I think, so far, mainly due to crashes and injuries. I'm going to go back to 2019, where at the Giro, he looked good, a few top 5s. I believe it was his first Grand Tour as well. And he crashed out, I think, stage 10 and had to withdraw from the race. He looked great. He looked absolutely great to start 2020, winning 2 of the Mallorca Challenges, beating, I think, Pascal Ackermann in both of those races, among a few other names, showing just how good Matteo Moschetti is, really, and how talented he is. But yeah, really failed to get back to his pre-injury level after returning last season. I think he was over the time limit at the Vuelta, the first rider over the time limit. And I really, really hope we do see a fit Matteo Moschetti this season. He showed some good form at Provence, but definitely not his best. At his best, I think Moschetti can win mass sprints very capably, and he's set to ride the UAE Tour in the coming days. Let's hope he can really challenge there and build his confidence more than anything.
Heading into the final portion of this podcast, and it is where we take a closer look at one rider that we will be watching throughout the season. I'm going to be extremely upfront with you. Usually when we do this, we have a couple of choices. This time, we had one rider, that's for sure, and then we struggled. I heard some odd sentences from my co-host saying that a certain Michel Ries is the new Andy Schleck. Now, I will not comment on that. I will let you guys say what you think about Michel Ries. But the rider I will go for is Antonio Tiberi. He joins them from the team Colpack Balan, who often produces some decent riders. They have quite a lot of hype around him because they had Antonio Tiberi. He's now gone in the World Tour. He's going to make his World Tour debut on the UAE Tour in a couple of days. A decent rider. He's done well on the Giro Ciclistico d'Italia, I think, last year. He's won, I think it's Gran Premio Industria, and I cannot remember the end of the sentence, but mainly he's won the Junior World Championships of Time Trial by going the wrong way. So somewhat of an incredible performance. His 2019 season was very decent he would have been 20. Actually, no, he would have been 17, I believe, in 2019. So he's done very well, getting a few stages here and there on the Course de la Paix. So a rider making his first few steps in World Tour, and I'm quite curious to see how he'll develop.
Yeah, Tiberi, his main result was the junior time trial in Yorkshire for sure, which was just incredible how he did manage to win that race. Last season, he rode a few races for Trek. Didn't really ride anything that suited him as a Trek rider. I believe he was mainly riding the youth categories. But we will see him on the UAE Tour in the coming days, I believe. So very excited to see what he can do on the likes of Jebel Hafid there. So you did mention, Guillaume, there was one standout young rider for Trek-Segafredo, the 19-year-old Quinn Simmons from America. Really a very, very talented rider, and a rider who got himself into some trouble on social media last season. And we can talk all we want about that. It seems the team have put it aside. They've dealt with it and tried to move on with the situation, which is good to see. So hopefully Simmons has learnt his lesson there, I guess, and we'll see him do the talking on the bike this season and beyond, because he turned 19 in the middle of last season. He started last season 18 years old, and his performances for a rider so inexperienced was just fantastic. I remember in particular the Britannia Classic in Plouay, which was won by Michael Matthews. But Quinn Simmons throughout was so aggressive, constantly attacking at the front, going off the front, trying to get in breakaways, and in the end he did manage 6th place in the final sprint. He was so strong that day in France. He wasn't able, I think, to ride as many classics as he would have wanted in the end because of the social media incident. But this season he's set to ride the Ronde van Vlaanderen, other Cobble Classics, Paris-Roubaix, Milan-San Remo, Amstel Gold. I'm not sure what this man can achieve. I really am not. But if he wins a race this year at World Tour level, I don't think I would be surprised, because his talent is off the charts.
Oh, I agree. He's a very very decent one-day racer. The thing is, I actually don't know either what kind of terrain he would be good at or good on. Can he perform well on the cobbles? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks around him. I know he won Govevelgem, I think, in the youth ranks, but Govevelgem is not known for having the most cobbles on their parcours. So yeah, but I do indeed believe that Quinn Simmons can win something next year. Maybe not at World Tour level, but I don't know, like a couple of maybe a Belgian race at Pro Conti level. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Maybe later on in the season, like a Brabantse Pijl, for example, could potentially suit Quinn Simmons. But yeah, he is for me the main youngster for Trek-Segafredo. All of their hopes for the future revolves around the American from Durango. So yeah, if he can avoid a bit more social media debacles, then I think he's fine.
For sure. I mean, it seems he's going to kick off his season this year with the Ardèche Classics in France, which are races that I think he can win for sure. I know Mark Hirschi has announced he's going to be riding those for UAE. I think we'll have the likes of Bob Youngles there as well. And these are the races which take place alongside Omloop and Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne. So perhaps we'll see some chances for Quinn Simmons there. And if we look back to last year's races there, I remember Remy Cavagna winning a race in emphatic fashion, I think by about 3 minutes ahead of anyone else. It's a real kind of... They're two really difficult classics, and I think Quinn Simmons could well win one of those races. So the final section of the podcast today, I think we will try and put Guillaume on the spot as best we can here. So Guillaume, big question.
Mm-hmm.
Bauke Mollema, where is he going to finish at the Tour de France this season? His finishing GC position?
14th and a stage win.
14th and a stage win. I think that's very fair, and I think he'd be happy with that. But,
I think so.
We'll see. Maybe a GC challenge could be there or thereabouts, but of course very difficult in the Tour with Roglic, Pogačar and Ineos to get on the podium. But we'll see. But anyhow, guys, I think that will round out today's Trek-Segafredo preview. A team which haven't really pushed forward, it seems on paper, as much as perhaps they would have liked to this season. But plenty of chances, I think, for plenty of riders in different races, Grand Tours, Cobble Classics. They have a few chances. So I'm intrigued to see what they can do this year. Let us know as well in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube what you thought of the podcast and also what you think of our predictions. Have we gone a bit over the top in some cases? I expect that may be the case, but let us know what you think about Trek-Segafredo ahead of their season this year. Guillaume, any final words?
Giulio Ciccone, best climber of the Vuelta.
There we go. Thanks for listening, guys.
See ya.